Hey everybody, this
Bum,
is...
bum, bum. Hello.
Hi everybody, this is Marlo.
And this is Steve, and we are Lost Futures, a Mark Fisher podcast, and
We're unlocking an episode for you.
Yep, this is an old episode we recorded last season during our Ghosts of My Life book run through, and we're doing Oppenheimer in honor of the Oscars. Oppenheimer's up for like a bunch of Academy Awards, and we thought it was terrible.
Yep. Enjoy the episode. We recorded it just a couple days after we watched Oppenheimer, so it's a lot of our first thoughts, and have a good listen.
This place is nowhere. And it's forever.
Ghosts of my life.
This is a national emergency.
Detonator charge.
Hi everyone, it's a special patron episode, and we watched Oppenheimer, also a movie by Christopher Nolan, like that other movie we did the episode on.
The Lost Unconscious, Christopher Nolan's Inception. So this is the other episode we're doing on...
A companion episode, if you will.
A companion episode on the movie Oppenheimer.
Which we just watched.
And recording 2 or 3 days after watching the movie.
Yeah, no, we really needed this to sit with us.
Yeah, we need
fester and stew.
We need to
really
think about ourselves.
Appreciate the kino.
We needed to think about every single plot line and how it affects us.
It's Christopher Nolan trying to make Citizen Kane, and it's not that good, but it's like really long. It's technically a nice achievement. It's held up by what we discussed in the main episode, which is that Christopher Nolan is a solipsistic psychopath who does not understand that other people meaningfully exist. And that's really hard when you're making a biopic, because, like, you know, it's about other people. So, you know, the best Christopher Nolan can do is sort of like poke around in the dark and try and put something together, which he did. You know, like, okay, so Citizen Kane, the main framing device, is literally a reporter who needs to answer the question, who was Citizen Kane? And, like, that's, like, literally, like, the first 5 fucking minutes of the movie. They're like, we need you to get down there and figure out who this guy was as a person. Christopher Nolan has never considered asking that question about J. Robert Oppenheimer, even while making a 3 goddamn hour long movie.
That is the first thing I want to talk about, is it is so long. There are 3 acts, but each act is almost a movie. You know, It's an hour long for each act, and it is told, as you said, in a sort of Citizen Kane way, but it makes it even more convoluted with all the different tricks he uses.
So, like Citizen Kane, he uses a framing device. He actually kind of uses 2 framing devices. Unlike Citizen Kane, rather than have your framing device, let's have a reporter try and figure out who Citizen Kane is. Ergo, as the reporter figures things out, we, the audience, will follow him. This is a series of, well, it's a congressional hearing and also a security board appeals process hearing.
They're trying to take away his Q clearance, his security clearance.
Basically, both of these bureaucratic hearings as framing devices, which you might notice doesn't necessarily lend itself to answering the question, who is J. Robert Oppenheimer, which is, you know, theoretically what the movie is supposed to be about. But,
well, okay, so let's, for those who haven't heard it, as you say, there's 2 different framing devices. One is the interview that he has which is to investigate his left-wing and potential communist past.
Well, I mean, specifically, it's whether or not he is a security risk or whether he deserves clearance for top-level security stuff, which, you know, the background of that is essentially you get the idea that, you know, after World War II, J. Robert Oppenheimer, he led the Manhattan Project to build the bomb, the nuclear bomb. That's, you know, like what the fucking hook of this goddamn movie is. After World War II and really during World War II, he was very vocal about warning against the potential for an arms race with the Soviet Union, very vocal in wanting proactive attempts to reconcile with the Soviet Union and have very early arms control regime.
An international community, as he says in the film.
And that sort of annoyed people in power enough to where in the 60s they just kind of took his security clearance away as like a fuck you to him.
And the second framing device is the person he annoyed the most, which is Louis Strauss.
Played by Robert Downey Jr. in, I'd argue, one of Robert Downey Jr.'s best roles and like one of the best roles, the best like performances in this movie. Personally, I kind of liked it.
I thought it was all right. But they do his timeline in black and white to distinguish it. And he is, I heard somebody say that is like the narrow-minded thinking versus the full-color thinking. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, like there's all these
more
like
thought into this than Christopher Nolan did.
But Strauss was a Hoover Republican. And an anti-New Deal guy, an anti-communist. He was also anti-Zionist. He was also Jewish and a very prominent philanthropist and saved a lot of refugees during the Nazis' rise to power and did like a lot of altruism in Europe leading up to the Nazis taking power. He hated Roosevelt. Didn't like Truman because Truman was also a New Deal Democrat. But he is most known for politically backbiting with Oppenheimer over kind of petty differences and disagreements. He was like a amateur physicist, and Oppenheimer once made fun of him in a hearing early in the career where he mocked him and he never forgave him. And this was like the reason that was given in the movie, but also in his biography for why he was going so hard after Oppenheimer.
Right, I mean, like if it wasn't him, it would have been someone else. Oppenheimer was depicted as generally being annoying to people in power.
And the thing about this, as I researched the historical, is it's generally considered that after this hearing, he basically lost his career. He no longer, he didn't get on. He was voted no for the first time since 1925 to get on to the Commerce Commission or...
which was... also a power play by like a kind of new crop of left Democrats, which, you know, they very prominently teased, one of them being John Kennedy.
But the other thing is that the interview process with Oppenheimer also was like cited as the thing that haunted him going forward and broke his spirit or whatever. So these two things are like pivotal for these two people, and they both ended their careers and broke their spirits or whatever.
You're right.
So that's the framing device, and then you have all these flashbacks to how they got to this moment and to contextualize the things that they're asking in the interviews. And the first third of the movie is him being young and being a theoretical physicist and teaching students and gaining a following and gaining popularity, and also like being a good guy, sending money over to support the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War and engaging with union activists because they're asking about this in the interview. And the very loud-spoken, prominent Communist Party membership that was around him at all times, including his relationship to Florence Pugh's character, who was a real-life communist activist during the 1930s and 40s.
Yes, and also important to our analysis of Nolan, bad person, annoying, and eventually dead.
Yeah.
The perfect Christopher Nolan woman.
Yes, that's the thing that Fisher talks about in one of his paragraphs, which I'm going to read now.
It's one of the oldest tropes of Nolan.
Nolan's films have a coolly obsessive quality in which a number of repeating elements, a traumatized hero and his antagonist, which you here have as like Oppenheimer and Strauss, the traumatized hero and his antagonist are both a dead woman, Florence Pugh's character. What's her historical name?
I forget.
Jean Tatlock.
Sure.
A plot involving manipulation and dissimulation are reshuffled.
Yes.
And there's also like a noir element to it.
Yeah. So this is an individual, a little borderline personality, as they say, that Oppenheimer was involved with prior to getting married. Then he got married and kind of remained having an on-again, off-again affair with. Then he cut it off, and then she killed herself and or was murdered mysteriously, but probably killed herself. But, you know, she was also a prominent member of the Communist Party, something that they mention in the future. But yeah, she's our dead woman as well as bitchy, annoying woman, except for Oppenheimer's wife, who is also bitchy and annoying. There's no other women in this movie.
Both
Those
women,
are the two women in this movie. They're both kind of bitchy.
And the wife is also a former communist.
Yeah. Okay,
Emily
to be clear,
Blunt's character.
This isn't Master and Commander. There are other women in this movie. They do not really have speaking part. This movie did the opposite of passing the Bechdel test. This movie, left a rift where now an additional movie needs to pass the Bechdel test.
Yeah, it's so horrible how he treats women.
It's very,
the women in this movie are so horrible.
There's fucking two of them.
There's two of them, and both are you could just...
There's two of them.
You could just call them Mal 1 and Mal 2 from Inception.
Yeah.
A dead woman and bad woman. His wife is going through postpartum depression, cheats on her husband with Oppenheimer to begin with, and...
Well, she doesn't get the postpartum depression until after they get...
They have a child, she gets postpartum depression, and then they give the baby away to their communist friends to take care of.
Which is literally just how you dealt with postpartum depression back in the day.
And then she, is just kind of nags him the whole time.
Yeah, she's just kind of pouty and, miserable and, she's a very, Tony Soprano's mom sort of character. Just
yes, that archetype of mom.
Yeah, takes the light out of the room, just a general, black hole of misery. Yeah.
She has, one moment where
she has
in the
one,
interview...
Yeah, she has this one, fucking, Oscar speech moment.
It's so fucking annoying.
Because it's not fucking built up at all, where
a little...
Oppenheimer finds out, by the way, everyone, the movie is about the man who made the atomic bomb. He makes the atomic bomb, we use the atomic bomb, then we decide whether that's okay or we should be sad about it. That's the movie. We're going to, kind of just go through it, piece by piece. So, Oppenheimer finds out that he's, got the security thing, and he's like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden, this bitch, who hasn't said shit this entire fucking movie is like, you have to fight this. And it's why? I don't know if she wants him to fight it because she legitimately cares about his integrity, or if it's a status thing for her, or if she resents him because she thinks he's, weak and effete, and, this is how he needs to prove he's a man to her, or what? And then she comes in with this fucking Oscar speech about my husband and communism and
16 years. No, 17 years.
yeah.
No, 18 years.
Yeah, no, she gives this like fucking like killer. You're supposed to go like, yeah. You tell him, and it's like, again, I don't know why she's giving that speech. I don't know if she actually believes in her husband. I legitimately don't know if she likes her husband at all.
They can't show her without showing her be just the most miserable alcoholic too.
Yeah,
that's,
well, like, and again,
even during that speech, she's like twiddling her like flask that she's got in her purse.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like, I don't know if, like, I legitimately don't know, is she doing that because she actually cares about her husband and doesn't like how his name's being dragged through the mud? Is she doing this because she's afraid of losing status if her husband I legitimately, and it's never explained, their relationship is really never fucking touched upon until, okay, they get married in some fling because Oppenheimer is, quote, a womanizer, and like he knocks her up and it's
But they never show him womanizing, really.
Yeah, he has sex with 2 fucking people in this goddamn movie. Again, the only 2 fucking women in this movie.
And that's the other thing I want.
You can't show him womanizing if you don't have women in your fucking movie.
Well, and that's the one thing I noticed throughout the first act is that they don't give you any characterization of Oppenheimer. They give you other people which tell you about Oppenheimer to Oppenheimer.
J. Robert Oppenheimer, we hear you're a womanizer.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. That's how you know he's a womanizer.
You're a womanizer, you're an egoist, you've got...
you're a pinko, like, that's literally how we know these things.
But the other thing is his other friend is like, well, you know, are you worried about being treated differently over here? When he's in Germany during Nazi Germany, and he's like, what, you mean scientist? No, Jewish, you're Jewish. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a joke he was making.
It was a joke, but...
Like, I mean, that was a very sardonic, classical Jewish humor sort of joke that Jews made in Nazi Germany at the time.
But it's another instance of somebody else telling him about him.
Yeah, it's the only way we know he's Jewish.
Okay, so that's the first act, so they established that. The second act is him going to Los Alamos and making the atom bomb and like all the bureaucratic red tape that went into that. Mm-hmm. And that's when what's his name comes in, the Bourne Identity. Matt Damon comes in, and he's like a funny guy.
He's honestly the opposite of Robert Downey Jr.'s performance, where it's like, I would fucking forgot Robert Downey Jr. was in the movie. Like, if I didn't know ahead of time, it could have not occurred to me that was Robert Downey Jr. Whereas, as soon as I fucking see Matt Damon in a goofy fucking mustache,
he's nobody other than Matt Damon,
with his chubby fucking cheeks in a little army man uniform, I'm like, okay. And he's like, "Hi, J. Robert Oppenheimer. I'm with Army. We need you." Yeah.
And so it's like the middle part of the movie is...
Yeah, they're all living on a little, like, commune, which, like, you know from history was a suck and fuck fest, but they don't fucking show that at all.
There's no sex.
There's no mescaline. There's no sucking and fucking. All things we know happened at Los Alamos. There's no fucking Aleister Crowley Thelema fucking, like, Satan rituals. All shit we know happened at Los Alamos.
This movie
did not happen in this
movie was so hyped for being Christopher Nolan's like big sexual stuff in his movie.
Yeah, it's the first tits in a Nolan, so get ready to jack off to Francis Pugh in the least sexy nude that you've ever seen.
Yeah, Florence Pugh kind of does
which is not a comment on Florence Pugh's body. It's a comment on how it was presented and shot in a starkly desexualized manner.
Least sexualized sex scene ever. It also
again, Christopher Nolan is a solipsistic psychopath who doesn't think people are real.
And so a lot of the middle part of the movie kind of lags and kind of just goes through like, oh, we're just going to build a bomb. Should we build an H-bomb? No, we're not going to build an H-bomb.
Actually, that is like one of the few points that I actually did laugh at was with Teller just like, okay, they're going through, and this is like also historical. Atom bombs are super simple. Immediately we knew exactly how to build an atom bomb. It was a matter of making enough fuel for it. But yeah, they're like, okay, so there's two kinds of atom bombs. The gun type and the implosion type. Gun type works like this. Implosion type works like this. And then this dude's like, what if we use hydrogen? And they're like, what? Oh, we could like...
Yeah, that was Benny Safdie.
Yeah, it was Benny Safdie.
And he's the father of the hydrogen bomb,
yes,
Edward Teller.
Yes. Yeah, why don't we use hydrogen? What do you mean? Well, we fuse hydrogen. How the fuck are we gonna fuse hydrogen? With another bomb? What the fuck? Jesus Christ, dude. What the fuck? Who the fuck hurt you? God damn. No, we're gonna build a regular atom bomb, you fucking weirdo.
But this is supposed to be foreshadowing for the H-bomb kind of.
Well, yeah, like... I mean, like, Teller was, in fact, really obsessed with wanting to build an H-bomb for like several decades until they let him have his fucking toys, which did kind of require them sidelining Oppenheimer, and he also always hated Oppenheimer because Oppenheimer's like, no, why do you want to do this?
I want bigger bombs.
Like, why is this your fucking thing, dude? Like, play outside. Oh, we're not building a fucking H-bomb.
Which was called a super, right?
Yeah, it was codenamed the Super. So they're building the bomb at Los Alamos. Again, building the bomb means they already have the bomb. They need to wait for Chicago to manufacture enough enriched uranium/plutonium. You know, it's sort of similar to like mixing together gunpowder and knowing how to do that's a little complicated. Putting it in an enclosed metal case and lighting a match is pretty simple. You know, once you got the shit, you're good with the bomb. We kind of all knew how to do that.
But they made a kind of a big deal about like, oh, maybe it'll never stop blowing up the air.
Yeah, they had that like 3 seconds where like some asshole like wrote some numbers down and it was like, will this immediately end all life on Earth? And then they like looked into it and they're like, probably not. So, you know, similar to the like Large Hadron Collider, will that like open up a black hole on Earth or some shit? Like, you know, you always have that kind of stuff. And, you know, again, factually, someone did knock that idea around a little bit and people took it seriously enough to also do some calculations and decided it probably wouldn't happen.
That was the second act that ends with probably the most known
the money
scene.
Shot of the movie, which is the Trinity test.
The Trinity test is kind of supposed to be the climax of the movie. I guess it was the climax of the movie.
It kind of was. I mean, afterwards, everyone's just kind of mopey and the movie just meanders along.
Peters out for another hour because it ends the second act.
No, I was seriously looking at my watch the entire fucking movie. Like, I was counting off the minutes.
Well, there were so many times that they went into another hallway with another interview with another classroom or another chemistry thing, and you have endless amounts of hallways, classroom, hallways, classroom, people talking in classrooms, hallways, administrative building, people talking in administrative buildings, sitting down for interviews, sitting down for hearings, sitting down. Like, the movie kind of gives you this labyrinthian feeling, which reminds me of Inception.
J. Robert Oppenheimer was mostly hired because he was good at working with people, and this whole thing was just sort of a project. Like, it wasn't even that, like, many brilliant minds. It was kind of very early on we figured out what we needed to do, and it would just take us time to do it.
It is kind of mythologizing it, too, in a way.
I don't know. I mean, I guess there's something there. Like, again, there'd be something there if you, like...
had a character development.
Yeah. I mean, if you explored... How did J. Robert Oppenheimer first come across the Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita.
In the Gato de Vida.
Yeah,
baby.
how did he first come across in the Garden of Eden?
But, you never get that.
No, you never get that. The only thing you get is him saying, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, because Florence Pugh's tits were in front of his face, and she was asking him what this passage said. And so, yeah, of course it's the one we all fucking know. And he just says it literally during pillow talk. And that's all we get from that. And it's like, yeah, that has to be in there because that's one of the pop culture things everyone fucking knows. And it's just like, you don't, like, why, what about, why does he have the Big God of Advita on his shelf? Like, it's the 1930s/1940s. Most white guys have never fucking heard of this book at the time. How did this person figure?
Well, and
might be an interesting...
She even says it like, oh, I'm surprised. Oh, he also says he's read Capital 1 through 3.
Das Kapital.
Das Kapital.
The thing that no one who speaks English calls it. I just really, my God, if you are not a communist and you are ever going to refer to capital, and you speak English, please don't fucking call it Das Kapital. It's so motherfucking annoying to hear.
Das Kapital.
Yes, Das Kapital. Oh, yeah, that capital. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
okay.
And the fact that he read volumes 1 through 3 is funny.
Yes. And then he quotes it, and the other person argues with him about the quote. And the quote...
Florence Pugh.
Yes. And the quote ain't from fucking Marx. It's not in capital. It's not in anything Marx ever wrote. Its property is theft, which is everyone fucking knows is Proudhon. I don't understand how you're gonna that was weird, but whatever. Yeah, please don't call it Das Kapital. That's so fucking lame.
Yeah, the whole him being in a cocktail party was weird. Not that the cocktail party was unrealistic and not weird, but they kind of just portray it where they're like, hey, we're all doing this fun thing, joining the Communist Party. Come on, Oppie, join with us.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it was institutionally a big thing, and the intellectuals would get together at cocktail parties. Are you a member of the party? Yeah, I'm a member of the party. You're not a member? Why aren't you a member?
Me and my boyfriend, this weekend is just full of things to do, but next weekend, we're gonna join the party. I think I'm gonna do it, Oppie. Yeah, it had that kind of not a 20s thing, because that would be different, but a kind of New Deal, I
mean, it's a cocktail party. It has an American suburbia cocktail party thing from the 20th century. That was a thing.
Okay, so they blow up the bomb. That's where we're at in the story.
Yeah,
he blows
so
up the
Trinity
bomb.
happens. I forget everything else.
Well, no, and then the third act is kind of spent tying up all of the loose ends that are why he's in the interview to begin with, and how did he... basically, as Fisher says, the manipulative plot involving manipulation and disseminations being reshuffled, and an ontological indeterminacy, and oh my God, political infighting, political backbiting.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
political intrigue where you find out two things that end up blowing up the whole thing. There's two big reveals. The two reveals are that Oppenheimer is only in the interview because his friend Strauss, played by Robert Downey Jr., set him up and put people in power in that committee to surveil him and basically come down on him and ruin his life for 2 fucking months. Mm-hmm. And that it was the guy that you see as his friend in the beginning is actually the betrayer.
Yeah. And that had one of those very reveals where guy goes, wait a second. It was you, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and then the music goes, Mwah! and then it like replays some scene from earlier.
Oh my god.
Where it literally, because we had this one scene earlier where person A is being given a file on Oppenheimer by person B and says, "Here, use this to destroy Oppenheimer." And we saw that scene like 3 different times in the movie. Then they show the scene again, camera pans around, Robert Downey Jr. sitting right next to him.
Right. And
like,
it ended up being
one of those very, like, because that's how Christopher Nolan knows how to
do drama.
Yeah, make a move like that has to happen in the third act of the Chris Nolan movie.
And the whole thing is that it was a guy that was basically coerced into writing a letter.
Well, I mean, it wasn't coerced, too.
Oh, I thought, like dictated by Robert Downey Jr.
Well, yeah. I mean,
to call him a communist. And
he was
say,
asked to, and it was a thing he wanted to
and
do.
that he thought he was a Soviet spy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was the accusation. I think that J. Robert Oppenheimer is a Soviet spy, therefore he is a security risk and should have his security clearance revoked. And I'm sending it off to the FBI. Mm-hmm. Also, check out his file. He's got all of these skeletons in his closet.
Right.
Then there's a second reveal, right? Because that's the one reveal about his interview. But the second reveal is Rami Malek's character, who you only get like one word from.
Yeah,
he's like an assistant.
He's in the movie for like most of the movie, but then like in the third scene, all of a sudden it's like, wait, he has a monologue?
You mean the third act?
Yeah, third act. Yeah,
he has a very Sorkin-esque monologue.
Yeah, no, he does full Sorkin in a trial. He does full fucking. Well, actually, Anna, I'd like to say the opposite of what you expected me to say.
Yeah.
And then the court goes,
yeah, and his whole his big
objection, Your Honor. On what grounds?
Oh, how dare he, good sir? How dare he just blemish a good man's name that's being brought before us?
Yeah, no, it was like it was a very.
But he only had like one word he said before that.
No, he was in front of the camera. I kept seeing Rami Malek, and I was like, it's Mr. Robot.
Hey, it's Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, he didn't do shit in that movie until, like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I guess he has a fucking monologue now that's, like, integral to the plot. Fine.
And that's, like, the bow to tie up that plot device.
Right, so anyway,
because it basically just
Strauss gets his comeuppance. You know, I would say that. So it is funny. So coming into this, I had the thought of someone actually made Oppenheimer before. It was Hayao Miyazaki in the movie The Wind Rises, which is a 2013 Hayao Miyazaki movie me and Steve just watched about the guy who designed the main Japanese warplanes during World War II. So like similar idea of we appreciate this man as a person who is intellectually driven to create because that's a thing that we like in our society, but the things he created have destructive elements. And the one difference is Hayao Miyazaki doesn't give a shit about any of that other stuff. No, like, right, Chris Nolan knows he has to pretend to give a shit about, like, all the bad things. And also, you're not going to tell the Oppenheimer story without, hey, Oppenheimer spent the entire back half of his career speaking against nuclear proliferation, and
but also,
powers kind of ruined his career over it.
But also, like, vaguely being haunted by the effects of the genocidal destruction
Hayao Miyazaki is riding that fucking Japanese, like, 2023, we still don't think we really did anything wrong attitude. Like, yeah, we know, like, you guys think we did things wrong, and we appreciate your opinion on the matter. So, I mean, I would say there was an interesting exchange with Robert Downey Jr.'s character about Oppenheimer, which is, at the end of the day, the man is a hypocrite, that he basically, in Downey Jr.'s words, he wants to be remembered for Trinity. He doesn't want to be remembered for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He wants to have his cake and eat it too, as being considered the most famous genius man in all of American history, but wants to be relieved of any guilt he has for what he did. And I think that's a question that the movie at least validly approached. You know, again, like, the movie approaches a lot of things. It makes a competent film. It just isn't sure where it stands. It doesn't want to take a stance, but it knows it needs to ask questions, quote unquote.
Well, and that, to go back to Fisher, because we are a Mark Fisher podcast, he does say, Nolan nevertheless maintains that however intractable his films might appear, they are always based on a definitive truth which he knows but will not reveal. As he said of Inception in the interview with Wired, I've always believed that if you make a film with ambiguity, it needs to be based on a true interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, I think
if it's not, then it will contradict itself, or it will be somehow insubstantial and end up making the audience feel cheated.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in that case, the mystery and the truth is literally more about the plot of the movie. Like, for example, did the top fall or not? Rather than ideologically, is it okay that we drop the bomb on Japan or not?
Well, yeah, and that's the sort of, like, the top of this movie that never gets resolved.
Like, I would argue that the movie does take generally a liberal-ish...
Okay, let's get into that then.
Because this is, like... Nolan's previous movies have ranged from sort of reactionary to overtly reactionary. This one is vaguely liberal and sort of, at the very least, has this optimistic wish that perhaps we could have avoided the Cold War if people listen to the scientists and the smart people, and it has very Neil deGrasse Tyson-y kind of deal where it's like, oh gee, aren't these people so smart? If only we would have listened to them.
Which I think you get in earlier films, just not in so overtly a political... Because it does seem like Cobb in Inception is the smartest man in the room that knows everything and can do everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has a very scientist-specific thing in kind of like the, you know, like the fucking 2000s lib thing where it's like, you should just get Neil deGrasse Tyson to sit on the Supreme Court. He knows what's up, and like, we just need to listen to these smart people and not be so clouded by ideology.
Yeah.
And in this case, the smart people were saying things like, wait, why are we still building this? Hitler just shot himself. Or wait, why are we, like, keeping things from the Russians? They're our allies. And we're scientists. We're used to working in an international community that shares information because that's actually the most efficient way to do science. And it was and even Matt Damon's character was just like, we need compartmentalization, and like all the scientists are like, yeah, that's gonna suck for us. Like, we don't like we don't like bureaucracy, we don't like secrecy, we like doing our jobs and getting our jobs done in the most efficient way possible. And you have this tension between science and bureaucracy, politics, ideology in a very specific way, and the scientists. And I think that ideology that was most harmful to the scientists was conservatism, was don't trust the Soviets, yes, we're gonna fucking bomb the shit out of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, even though they weren't definitively against that, I think, in the movie. In the same way, I'd argue they were actually pretty definitive in the idea that the Cold War was avoidable, or at least the arms race was avoidable.
Right. Similar to the narrative, I think it kind of has a nested doll effect of, like, I don't want to say, like, anti-ideology, but seeing ideology like inward in a way, like the enemy is always within. Like the enemy within America keeping the scientists from doing their job and working internationally is within the country, is the conservatives. And the conservatives see communism as the enemy within that needs to be routed out. And the interviews are all looking for the enemy within the person that could be revealed, which is the secret anti-American, pro-Soviet sympathy. So you have
that would have been a interesting thematic way to build Oppenheimer's character if Christopher Nolan was interested in doing that at all.
Well, I think he tried to. I think that was like his attempt at, if you're trying to figure out a way that this movie moralizes things and doesn't moralize and has ambiguities, that it does seem like the form itself kind of reflects the labyrinth that he created about who's really at fault. Because you have the conservatives that are malicious and that are like the authoritarian McCarthyists that are taking down the good, liberal, virtuous scientists that may have had some affiliations with communists, but really, like, they were also doing good things. And, you know, you attacking them is only impeding our work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have this internal, like, self-reflective thing of, as Fisher talks about, the self-helpiness that goes through a lot of Nolan's movies, which is that it's always internal. And I see that as going back to the Smiley episode, I compared this a lot to what he says about Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, because there are so many internal enemies. You never see a Soviet, you never see a Nazi, you just see Americans that are...
You never see a Japanese person.
You never see a Japanese person. Never on screen. Yeah. They are completely abstractions. All of the enemies and all of the drama are just Americans fighting Americans.
Yeah.
And to me, that goes back to kind of the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy thesis that, like, the mole was somebody who was around them. Like Fuchs. Fuchs was the mole in Los Alamos that was feeding stuff to the Soviets. He's somebody that was brought in, that was British, German, that was linking up with the Soviets. The bad guy of the movie reveals to be the closest friend who brought him on to begin with. You have this kind of like, all the problems are all internal and contradictory to this kind of American mishmash.
Right, yeah. Did you see that fucking bullshit on Twitter? Because, yeah, someone did a slightly cringy, post of, you don't see one Japanese person in Oppenheimer or whatever, and there was a fucking community note put on. Did you see this shit?
Yeah.
Or it's like, alright, well, if this doesn't demonstrate that truth is just an argument... Because, yeah, this community note was like, actually, there's no evidence that J. Robert Oppenheimer ever met a Japanese person. And it's like, yeah, that's...
Not the point.
Not what the point really was. And you're fucking idiots, and that's not a fact.
Right. And I think that speaks to what you have said about his overall solipsism. The solipsism doesn't really exist outside of Oppenheimer as this kind of black hole of a character, but also it doesn't exist outside of like American neoliberalism. There is this horizon of
it's like
possibility.
You barely get like any interaction with the British. You barely get...
Except as a German who recently became British and then betrayed the Americans.
Yeah, but like British military brass are barely fucking in it. You know, it's at once an interesting choice, but also like, does this maybe speak to something, is there's no war in the movie.
No.
There's not a single shot of any war anywhere in the movie.
It's all internal. The whole conflict takes place...
The only explosion is the Trinity.
The whole conflict takes place very internally. There is no external, like, force. There's only like other Americans. Because Nolan is so internalizing and interested in all of these like forces that are inside you, similar to the way that like Inception is all about going inside the mind and working out what's going on.
It's the scene of the crime.
The inside of the mind is the scene of the crime. Ideas are what move history forward. Oppenheimer is a man with an idea, and that's what progresses history and the consequences of that idea.
It is a weird subject, though, because it's like, it wasn't even his idea, and it was like never his idea. He was brought on to the thing as it was being started, but like, he didn't write the fucking letter to Roosevelt. Like, it wasn't a particular area of even his interest. He was studying fucking black holes. It's very interesting the way this, like, simultaneously, like, sort of presents the classical, like, American entrepreneur, whatever story of, yes, you had an idea and you had your crafts and your skills and you made that idea into reality, where it's like, yeah, Oppenheimer, again, was brought on because they thought he had good managerial skills.
He was the face, right?
Yeah, he was. He
didn't know math. He didn't know. He makes abundantly obvious. You guys probably know math better than I do.
Yeah, he didn't particularly like grinding through calculations. He hated experimental physics. He liked conceptual, theoretical, broad concept, theoretical physics, but didn't like filling in the details. Much like Christopher Nolan's approach to screenwriting. But it's like, yeah, it was just brought on. He didn't fucking come up with the idea. Like, he was aware of the idea you might be able to build a nuclear bomb, because every physicist was at the time. But it wasn't ever his thing.
Yeah. You know, you said in the episode that Nolan is a meta. He makes movies in meta, and Oppenheimer similarly.
Right, exactly. That's
is,
what that's
is a
exactly
meta,
the point I was making.
A meta guy.
Yeah, no.
He doesn't like the details. He doesn't like the
he
humans.
knows that. Yeah, if I filled in some like dialogue, this might be a good script. I really don't want to fill in dialogue, so I'll just do it as quickly and efficiently as possible. And Oppenheimer's the same way. It's like, yeah, I think I've discovered black holes. I just need to, like, fill in the math. But, you know.
Another thing that I thought that kind of is Fisher-related is just kind of the depiction of New Deal Democrats as kind of... That's something that you don't really see in this much depth or in this kind of light as much.
Yeah, I mean, you saw very much concentrated sort of on their absence and the like rightward turn of the Truman administration.
Agreed. It's almost like he's an antique. Like Oppenheimer has to be cast as an antique of a type of political affiliation that was going out of favor.
Well, it's like it's kind of like, and you read about this when you read the history. You know, in 1946, no one thought the Cold War was necessarily going to happen. Some psychopaths in Washington were really invested in the idea, but, like, generally speaking, a lot of people, countries, just sort of assumed, like, oh yeah, the United States and Soviet Union are allies. They'll probably keep being allies and figure this shit out going forward. It wasn't seen as like this inevitable ideological crash. That was the thing we kind of invented in like the 5 years after World War II, more than anything else. And seemingly, if Roosevelt lived, there's a thought that perhaps we would have at least established some strong post-war paradigm going forward with the Soviet Union, if not be on necessarily friendly terms.
Yes. And really, the only kind of legacy you see of the New Deal Democrats is basically the atomic bomb. Mm-hmm. Like, the only thing that, like, Oppenheimer is like, I'm New Deal Democrat, and he's traumatized and shown to have very superficial grief
Yeah.
About it. Like, he walks down the street in the third act and he sees people's kind of skin falling off, and he goes...
Basically, it was like that scene from Terminator 2 where Linda Carter is at the park and then the bomb goes off, except worse.
Right, and he also goes to a screening of what happened to the Japanese people, and they never show it. It's all off screen, and it's because it's kind of like an other that they can't approach. They also like show him just being like sad, and this kind of goes to what Fisher talks about with Cobb. Grief itself is a puzzle that cannot be solved, like the movie. And there's a certain psychic economy in collapsing the antagonist into the grief object. Since the work of grief is not only about mourning the lost object, it is also about struggling against the object's implacable refusal to let go. Yet there's something hollow about Cobb's grief on its own terms. It doesn't convince as anything other than a genre-required character trait. It instead to stand in for something else, another sadness, a loss that the film points to but can't name.
Yeah.
And to me, like, that is the whole third act. There's a whole third act of him just, like, grieving, but it's so hollow. His grief is so hollow, not really felt. He never really cries about it. Like, he cries when his ex-girlfriend is possibly killed / commit, dies by suicide, but you never see him cry about Hiroshima.
Yeah.
You like the movie more than I did, I think?
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I mean, I'm never going to watch it again. Literally, when the credits rolled, the first thing I said is, I'm never going to watch this movie again because it's fucking not worth the time. But, yeah, it's a movie.
It's a slog to get through. I was so bored.
It's a competently put together movie that's also, like, really fucking boring and, like, not very deep and doesn't earn its pretensions. Yeah. Fine.
Well, I guess tune in next time for our review of Barbie through a Lacanian, Zizek'ian, Butler.
The sublime object of life in plastic.
Well, yeah, I mean, we did Barbenheimer, so...
Yeah, we did
We did it. We did the meme. We did the meme.
We did the meme thing.
We did the meme. It was a great day.
Barbie's a better movie.
Barbie's a much better movie.
Spoiler, Barbie's the better movie. Anyway.
Well, that was Oppenheimer. Thanks. See you next time.
In a garden of Peter, honey, don't you know that?